But does the shape of something's teeth tell you what it has to eat? No. I mean, you look at bears, you know. Of course, a bear will eat a fish. We're in a synth-verse world, but you know, bears love berries and nuts and stuff like that. Ever seen a bear eat blueberries? You know, they take their teeth and they wrap it around the bush and they do this. Then they wiggle back their mouth and they have a big mouthful of blueberries. Their teeth are perfectly designed for raking those berries off the leaves. Of course, we look at the teeth and we say, oh, sharp teeth, it's designed to kill and eat meat. But remember, in the beginning, everything is eating plants. Okay, very good means no evil, no death, no carnivorous activity, right? No struggle for existence, no survival of the fittest, no death for the unfit. That was the very good world. We don't live in that world anymore. Now, somewhere in there, we know that the dinosaurs existed. How do we know about them? We know about them because of their bones. Now, understand something. I work with many PhD scientists, and I really respect them. Most of them are very diligent, very hardworking, but you need to understand that when you're talking about something that supposedly happened in the past, you have to make some guesses about some things. Because you didn't see the process. See, it's a different type of science. When somebody says to me, well, Cal, science has proven this, and science has proven that, I get where they're coming from. Usually they're talking about a method of science done according to the scientific method, where you can set up an experiment and you can repeat the process over and over again and you can observe it in real time. That's how you get laptop computers, etc. But when somebody says, look at this a bone in a rock, okay? That's what everybody's observing. That's what we're observing in real time. And then they say, yeah, and it happened 17 million years. Wait a second. You just went from experimental science to like forensic science, where you're making guesses about the processes that put those things down. So, you know, when we're told about the dinosaurs and how they lived and how they ate and what they did and all this kind of stuff, really you're making some guesses. Sometimes very educated guesses, but you're making some guesses. So, just to illustrate my point here, what do you guys think that is? Yes?
A dog skull.
A dog skull, very good. Have you been to one of my presentations before? That's good. That was excellent. Okay, I'm going to give you a harder one now, but everybody gets to play. Okay, what do you guys think that is? You want to guess again?
Tiger skull.
A tiger skull. Okay. Anybody have a different answer? A boar. Okay. Let me show you what it actually is.
Okay, it's a boring chihuahua.
It's a boar chihuahua. Well, that's very interesting because see, if I let some mutt come in here now and a chihuahua come in, they were running around and go, hey, look at the two dogs. But look at the difference in morphology in the skull. Imagine you've never seen dogs living and you just found the skulls in a rock layer. How would you interpret that? See, if you're a creationist, you might say, man, are those part of the same created kind? You know, God created kinds to reproduce after their own kind, but that doesn't mean there wasn't going to be any variability or variation. Or if you're an evolutionist, you might be going, oh man, did that one evolve into... So you got to make some guesses based on what your starting assumption is. Let me give you another one here. Crocodile?
No.
Actually, that's a bulldog.
Bulldog.
See, I just showed you 3 dog skulls. So different, all the same kind. See, that's not evolution. God created kinds of creatures to reproduce after their own kind, but He never said that they would just, stamp out exact copies. Otherwise, we'd all look like Adam and Eve, wouldn't we? Now, I'm going to give you one more skull. I promise it's not a dog, okay? What do you guys think that is?
Saber-toothed tiger.
Saber-toothed tiger. That's the #1 answer I get. Ding! It should be like Jeopardy or whatever. Anybody else got an answer?
Walrus.
Walrus? Good. I usually get one more. Elephant. I usually get those 3 in that order. But this is a creature that exists today on the planet. You guys can go look it up on the internet or at the library, whatever like that. Let's look at what it's called. It's called a Chinese water deer. Let's read about the Chinese water deer. It's a creature we can study today. Chinese water deer is a small cervid native to regions of China. Southeast Asia has been introduced into Europe. And the water deer is a browser feeding mostly on leaves, berries, saplings, and other plants. It's a vicious saber-toothed plant eater. Sneaks up on plants and guts them, with its vicious teeth. And let's look at the pictures of the water deer. This is not Photoshop. This is not make-believe. This is a real deer. The one's mounted here. Somebody's hunting. Now, if you found the water deer skull in a rock layer, and you'd never seen one living, you're going to have to make some guesses. What did it do? How did it hunt? Look at its teeth. Blah, blah, blah. Right? As a matter of fact, you guys like movies? You know, you go to a movie and you got the previews, you know, you're checking out what's coming up, and you got that guy with the preview voice, you know, one man, one desire, you know that guy? You could make a pretty good preview. I think it'd be kind of like, you know, Bambi was a nice deer, but they pushed him too far. You know, you can make up a pretty good preview. But anyway, I mean, we're constantly getting told these stories about things that supposedly happened in the past, etc., but they're guesses. They might be educated guesses, but they're guesses. This is the Word of God. There's no guesses. Right? God's Word from beginning to end, He never changes, He never lies. He never deceives people. So this is the real history. You know, when we're thinking about fossils, I mean, how fossils get made, you guys probably remember something like this in the textbooks. I know a lot of the students I spoke to yesterday at the Lutheran youth camp, almost all of the hands went up when I showed a diagram like this. I said, how many of you guys have seen something like this in your textbook about how fossils form? You know, the fish is going along, the fish dies, he gets to the bottom, he gets covered over slowly, turns into a fossil. Almost all their hands went up. This is a picture from the side of the Tyrone Museum, world-class museum. This is how fish are, you know, get fossilized supposedly. Guys, this is the most ridiculous picture I've ever seen in my life. That's what I got taught when I was in school. This is the dumbest thing I ever got taught. I mean, science is based on observation, right? You guys ever gone swimming in a lake or a river or the ocean or something? Have you ever pulled on your trunks and you run into the water? Oh man, I hate those fossilizing fish. Has that ever happened to anybody? I don't mean you stepped on a dead fish. I mean one that's kind of half-baked. Has that ever happened to anybody here? Nope. No, it didn't happen to any of the kids I talked to yesterday either. As a matter of fact, last year when I was in Australia, and I was out snorkeling on the Great Barrier Reef, you know, I was looking at the bottom of the ocean. You know what I didn't see? I didn't see one dead fish sitting there waiting to be covered over slowly. Because do we know what happens to dead fish sitting in the bottom of a river or lake? Yeah. All the other little nibblers come by and the crabs get in the bacteria. You can't make a fossil that way. The only way you can make a fossil is to make it rapidly. You want to make a fish fossil? You know, I mean, all these tsunamis and stuff like that, you know, the earth shakes and all these underwater turbidity currents and, you know, all the sediment comes flying along and boom. Now you're going to have a chance to make a fossil. If the right, you know, chemicals and things like that are in that sediment, it might turn into a fossil, but you're not going to make it slowly. But it's in every textbook. See, modern geologists have thrown that out, but they're still teaching it to our 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds, to get them thinking about a concept of millions of years based on something no one has ever seen. This is the paradigm that people are learning. Millions of years. That's how the fossils get laid down. What are creationists saying? Obviously, the history is recorded there. There was a global flood. Fountains of the Great Deep crack open. 40 days of rain. I mean, we've seen what water can do very vividly on the TV lately, haven't we? My wife's from Nova Scotia, and you go to a jog in Nova Scotia, highest tides in the world. Water comes in, water comes out, it erodes the cliff face there. And you know, sometimes you can see trees that are 30 feet tall standing upright as the sediment is this way. I mean, this slow idea, slow deposition. I mean, see this yellow line here? That's supposedly 1 million years of sedimentary deposits, according to the evolutionary timeline. Do dead trees stand upright as this sediment come in at a rate of 5,000 years per centimeter? That thing got buried rapidly. It got buried catastrophically in a huge flood-like condition. And there's fossils all the way through the thing. So when you look at something like a dinosaur, and it's 6 feet tall when it's laid down, man, it must have got buried rapidly. See, many people still carry this concept that fossilization itself is a process that takes a long time. Some people say, oh, millions of years. But this is Dr. Phil Curry. He works with the Tyrone Museum. And he wrote a book called 101 Questions About Dinosaurs. And this is what he said about fossilization as a paleontologist. He says, fossilization is a process that can take anything from a few hours to millions of years. Wow, that's a big time range, isn't it? I mean, science is based on observation. So which one of those two processes do you think Phil has observed?
A few hours.
Yeah, I'd go with the hours. Because no one has ever seen fossilization take place over millions of years. As a matter of fact, if you believe it takes place over millions of years, you believe that on faith, not science. Because you've never seen it happen. So you've got less way to support your views. He goes on to say the amount of time that it takes for a bone to become completely permineralized is highly variable. If the groundwater is heavily laden with minerals in solution, the process can happen rapidly. Well, I would imagine at the time of the fountains of the Great Deep bursting open, we know a lot of minerals come out of volcanoes and stuff like that at the time of the flood. I would say you'd have perfect processes for creating lots of fossils. They were doing a dinosaur dig down in Hell Creek, Montana in 2005. Evolutionist Mary Schweitzer, she finds a tyrannosaur. One of the femurs, the leg bones, is so big she has to break it to put it on a helicopter to get it out of the area. She noticed something weird about the center of the bones, and when she got it back to her lab, she looked it over and she published in Science magazine, very prestigious magazine. Her title of her article was "Soft Tissue in 70-million-year-old T-Rex Bone." She found unfossilized, stretchy tissue, red blood vessels, red blood cells inside of a creature that's supposedly 70 million years old. That's pretty good Tupperware, isn't it? I mean, the lid's got to be on there real tight. Guys, how could something like that last for 70 million years? Answer, it couldn't. But if you ask the evolutionists, they say, well, maybe there's this unknown process that could somehow keep this soft tissue there. As a matter of fact, a couple of years after this came out, because this was devastating to the evolutionary timeline, I read a paper where two evolutionists were trying to explain this away and say, well, it's not soft tissue, it's biofilm. You know, you leave a bucket of water outside and it gets that scum around it. It's bacterial gunk. That's how they were trying to explain this away, bacterial gunk. So Schweitzer herself, an evolutionist, was so attacked by her fellow evolutionists, she went looking for more. And a couple of years ago, she found one. This time in a hadrosaur, a duck-billed dinosaur, supposedly 80 million years old. She says you can sequence the amino acids in the collagen she found. So now, several times now, we've found soft tissue unfossilized inside of these dinosaurs, which is amazing. She actually said, I had one reviewer tell me that he didn't care what the data said. He knew that what I was finding wasn't possible. I wrote back and said, well, what data would convince you? And he said, none. La 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 la. See, don't let the facts get in the way of a good theory. Right? You know, they found a dinosaur mummy recently. Leonardo, they call him. Here's the artist drawing and the actual picture of the mummy. They found muscle, nail material, a beak, skin. National Geographic, their article. Even his last meal is in his stomach. They know what he ate. A salad of ferns, conifers, and magnolias. Interesting, isn't it? Now, if you go down to the ROM, and they've got the the exhibit on the mummies there. How old do they say the mummies are at the ROM? 3,000 years? About that? Leonardo supposedly 70 million years. And these were specially prepared to preserve. This is a natural process, so to speak. Interesting, isn't it? So I want to show you the difference between when a scientist, sometimes what he observes, but what overrides his observations. This is Dr. Ralph Molnar, who's a paleontologist for the Queensland Museum, this next quote, and he's talking about an extinct lizard he's found on Discovery Channel. Look at how he describes what he's seeing and then what his conclusions are anyway. Now this specimen looks like it had come from an animal that looks like it died 200 or 300 years ago. All dry, chalky, that sort of thing. Doesn't actually mean it died 200 or 300 years ago. In Montana, I've seen dinosaur bones that look like they come from animals that died 200 or 300 years ago. I know very well that they died much longer than that. It gives a suggestion that Megalania may have been alive fairly recently. See, what he's observing is something young. But he knows, just like National Geographic knows, but it's not based on it. I think it's based on a pre-belief in evolution. See, if you